let's talk to Benji in Alabama. Benji, what is on your mind today?
Hey, so I was going to call in about why God doesn't reveal himself, but also, just as a side note, I think society as a whole, nowadays at least, is going to probably end up destroying themselves just based on the past 30 years, roughly, or even since the 60s. I mean, to be technical, I'd say since the 60s. There's been division and war and everything else more than there has been in the past 100 years or so.
Yeah, but you say the 60s is maybe the moment we started to become divided. I have to draw your attention back a few decades before that, when we might say the world was the most divided, when we had a very large war all around the world.
Yeah, I was going to say World War I, World War II, but I figured 60s would be a good spot to start, because
gotta draw a line somewhere for it to all begin. The end of the beginning of the end.
Well,
what about the global wars, though?
The books that got out of the Bible, but God has did this several times already, right? At least in the old story.
I lost you a little bit for a moment there, Benji. I'd love for you to start fresh and talk to us about God revealing himself and what insights you might have to offer to explain that to us.
Yeah, so in the Bible, which I know y'all don't really care much for it, but
sure. But when we say that, why doesn't God reveal himself, we are talking about ostensibly the Christian God.
No, I get that. Yeah. So God has made the world several times now and destroyed it and did it again and destroyed it and did it again. And I'm a Gnostic, and the last time he destroyed it was a flood, and now people think he's going to destroy it with fire or whatever.
Yeah, and can you tell me what you mean when you describe yourself as agnostic while talking about the accuracy of the Bible and of theoretically the Christian God?
Yeah, so Gnostic, I'm a Gnostic, not agnostic, just a little trick on that. And then also, I believe God is somewhat evil. You can't have good without evil. If you had all good, you wouldn't recognize what good was, because you would have nothing to compare it to. And then the whole issue of free will, as far as that goes. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just saying, I actually agree with that. That if you don't have evil to scale with good, you don't recognize when you actually have good. Yeah, that's interesting.
Right. Yeah. But the other thing too, I think if God did choose to reveal himself, either people wouldn't believe that he is actually God, or it would just create a situation where he would have to destroy us anyway. I think that free will.
Who is this God that we're talking about? I'm still really kind of hung up on that question. Like I don't need him to be the Christian God. We can talk about him in more general terms or think of it as a philosophical God. But if this God is partly evil, are they all powerful? Do they have the ability to convince people that they exist? Do they have the ability to reveal themselves at all?
So I would explain this like this. So I'm talking about the Christian God, and I am a very old version of Christianity, where God is not literally all powerful. Now, he did help create the universe and stuff like that, but there's limits. And I mean, there's limits on all of his abilities.
Why?
So, for example, he's logically possible, not infinitely possible. You can't create a watch so heavy you can't lift it type crap.
Who would be putting limits on God, though, if God created everything?
Well, God helped create everything, which really begs the question.
Well, the Bible was polytheistic anyway. A lot of people don't even know that. But back in the day when Jesus supposedly was alive in Jerusalem, everyone was actually polytheistic. You had Baal, you had Elohim, and all the other older gods that came before Jesus, or Christianity, or whatever you want to call it. And so, I mean, if people looked at the history of that, and even God himself, if you believe the Bible is the Word of God,
do you believe that? Do you believe that the Bible is accurate? Do you believe that it is mostly accurate? Is it useful? Is it the Word of God? And if so, what does that even mean?
So the Bible is not accurate at all. I mean, it would have been if they would have wrote it down, whatever was said. But then you have the game.
So it's not perfectly or inerrantly correct, but it is good enough to warrant scholarship, to warrant reading.
Right. Well, it is. I mean, it has good advice in it, just like anything else would. I mean, you can find usefulness in just about anything. However, in the
I don't know about that.
days, when they put the
that.
Bible together, they took a whole lot of books out of it, burned it as heresy. The language barriers and things that happened from Hebrew to Greek, Latin, English, and all of the other things, there's a lot of stuff that got either mistranslated or took out or changed, over the several centuries. And even, for example, the King James Bible, 1500s, I believe, England King James version, even that, the Old English has words that don't actually translate to what the Greek and the Hebrew said. And so a lot of scholars can tell you, the Bible's good for, positivity or something in some aspects. It does have.
Sure. Well, if the Bible is good or decent, but far from perfect, why are we going to the Bible to understand morality instead of, philosophy or psychology? Why are we going to the Bible to understand the creation of the universe rather than geology or even history?
Well, I'm going to answer that in two ways. One, I don't go to the Bible to understand reality because the Bible, to me, is a collection of books that was written by humans several hundred years ago.
So you don't think it is?
Yeah, I'm on board with that, but I have to ask respectfully, why are we talking about the Bible then? Because I thought you were trying to explain to us why God doesn't reveal himself.
Right.
Right, that's what I was trying to get back onto. We kind of got sidetracked there. The reason why God doesn't reveal himself is it would create a scenario where everyone could rebel against him, which is probably something he doesn't want, and then he would have to destroy the earth and start all over. Which, in retrospect, I think giving free will to people was a mistake anyway. Because on one hand, if he had a world where everyone was reverent towards him and knew who he was and was, just subservient the whole time, and this would be a world without sin, because, sin was the separation in some aspect of God to some people. So if we didn't have sin and everyone was naked and everyone knew who God was, he probably just didn't want that, wiped it out, because that's the flood, basically, and all the other crap that happened, angels, mating with humans or whatever.
Didn't the flood actually happen? Wasn't the supposed reason the flood happened because people were sinful and were bad and they weren't obeying God? Am I remembering that incorrectly? Isn't that kind of what that was about, where everybody was sinners except Noah and his family who...
It wasn't just the human race. I mean, there was angels that came from heaven, mated with females. That's
Do you actually believe that?
Well, it's in the old books that they banned, but yeah, I mean, it says that, like in Enoch, for example, the Watchers.
Right. So it says that in the Bible or some versions of the Bible, but I'm still really kind of circling this question of, do we even believe the Bible at all, a little bit, or how come, or why not?
I think there's some truth to it, but I think a lot of it has either been changed or misinterpreted or mistranslated.
So what parts of it do you think are true then? If you had to highlight some points where you're like, this part is for sure true, and why?
Well, I mean, I believe in angels and heaven and hell and stuff, but I would say the book of Revelation was referring to Moro or whatever, the emperor in Greece at the time. And then, because that's what a lot of scholars say, they say that Revelation was more referring to the Greek war than anything, and Roman Empire. And And then I would say that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are basically copies of each other. And really, none of the Gospels, we don't know who wrote any of the Gospels because they're all anonymous. And I would say that the church put the names on there, and it's just been a matter of tradition. And I've tried to point this out to people at my church, and then they just get pissed off because they want to believe what they want to believe. But in my opinion, you know, if someone's not ready for the truth, you can't tell them the truth and then believe you anyway. And then also, I think the human race is going to destroy themselves eventually because of war, famine, disease, plague, and everything else, plus natural storms that are getting worse and worse because of greenhouse gas effect and global warming, which I know y'all brought that up earlier. But the way that the world is now, I'm very old, and I'm just tired of the world trying to destroy themselves. And you have, you know, police and citizens and military and everything fighting against each other, and it's a bunch of bull crap. And then on top of that, Christians want to try to blame all of the bad stuff on Lucifer and all of the good stuff on God. But if God is the one in control, then ultimately the bad that happens in the world will be God's fault too, which is why I stay a Gnostic, because Gnostics believe that God is partly evil, which makes sense if you believe in the Bible. But for some reason, Christians nowadays want to cherry pick and say, oh, well, God's not evil, but it literally says in the Bible, number one, it says God created good and evil, which will make him evil. He also created hell. That makes him evil. And then it also says Lucifer has dominion over all of the earth, which is why...
Benji, I hear you cherry picking from the Bible and not identifying as a Christian, but as a Gnostic, while also going to church and reading the Bible and talking about something that sounds a lot like the Christian God. And I'm not saying that you're right or wrong about any of these points, but I am very much trying to understand what makes you different. How do you know these things that you know, or why do you believe these things that you believe?
Well, what I was just quoting is actually in the Bible. It's just people don't really pay attention to it.
Okay, but do we care what's in the Bible? Do you care what's in the Bible if it's not accurate in many ways?
Well, I know that stuff is. I mean, I know some of the stuff is, but...
How, though? Like what when you look at parts of the Bible, what makes you point at some and say that's true and others and say that's not true and I'm sure of this?
Yeah, historicity, personal experience, as well as the older books that came before the Bible, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, and the history of the other gods that came before the Bible, which, for the record, the Bible was polytheistic, not monotheistic anyway. But I mean, there's a whole lot of history. I mean, there's a whole lot of history to jump through when you actually investigate the Bible and realize, oh, well, a lot of Jerusalem and Samaria and all these other places was worshiping other gods, including Baal, which, in fact, there's a story in the Bible where a group of people worship Baal, and then another guy worships Elohim or you know, Jehovah, or whatever you want to call them. And they did a experiment to see what caused the fire to start on those rocks, and it was a chemical reaction from the water.
So sorry, the fire where I'm so sorry, the fire where? I think there was a part there that wasn't explained.
Yeah, so there's a story in the Bible where there's I think two groups of people. One worships Baal, the other one worships Elohim or Jehovah, and they're basically challenging each other. They're like, okay, well, whoever can start a fire, you know, on these rocks or start a fire, you know, that God's the true God. And then the ones that worship Baal wasn't able to. And then the ones that worship Jehovah, Elohim, they had rocks that I believe was limestone or something. When they put the water on it, caused the chemical reaction and caused the fire.
So wouldn't that...
They wouldn't know that at that time. But,
okay. I see what you're saying. Sorry, I was going to say, wouldn't you say that's science? But you might actually say that's science.
Huh?
Never mind. Never mind. Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's the summary of that story where I was getting that from. It's in the Bible, but I forget what verse it is.
Sure. I mean, I think you're talking about the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal in First Kings, but I'm very much trying to understand which parts of the Bible are true, which aren't, and how do you specifically determine the difference? And I'm not asking you to be perfect. Like anytime I read a science textbook that is maybe a few years out of date, or honestly is just written by a theorist that I don't always agree with or concur with, I read critically, and I might find things that I believe to be accurate and things that I don't believe to be accurate. But I'm able to discern those things because I've read a lot of other books that I'm comparing them to. And I, bring my own theoretical framework to all of this. Tell me about yours.
Yeah. Let me point out the differential there between science and religion, even the Bible and the science book as far as that goes. So the Bible has stuff that has been changed and rewritten and mistranslated amongst other things, so there's no way to tell what's what. Science, by definition, is the process of learning that is constantly evolving and fixing itself and correcting itself. So there's not really going to be an abstract, absolute answer in science because let's say, for example, that, perfect example, the firmament over the earth. Right. And back 100 years ago, roughly 150 years ago, people used to argue that the universe was finite or that the world was finite. And that there was a dome over the earth, the firmament, it let the water through the firmament, the dome into the earth and what, yada, yada. We don't believe that anymore. I don't. Some people do, I think, but most people don't. And so that's an example of religion versus science, because religious people would say, oh, well, yeah, but, it was a misinterpretation or something to that effect. Where science goes, oh, well, we went to the moon and there's no dome, over the earth. We can see the earth from the moon, and so we know there's no dome. And so basically what religion does is just move the goalpost. And they say, oh, well, the dome's actually, over the solar system or over the Milky Way or wherever.
Sure. But what do you do, Benji? Like, what do you do to understand which parts of the Bible are of value? And I want to point out, I've kind of tried to ask you that question a few different times, a few different ways. I'd like to hear your answer and leave it there if we may.
So I base value on the Bible based on personal experience, my knowledge, and how I live my life. So I guess you could argue secular morality.
Sort of a knows it when I sees it kind of mentality. If it feels right, it must be at least somewhat accurate, and then you compare it against other things that you've read.
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your honesty and your ownership of that. And, in a certain sense, I'll say that that's really all any of us can do. But I have to say that if this is the book that you're doing that too, and these are the conclusions that you're drawing, there might be something about your epistemology that's worth really examining. Consider your sources, consider your use of intuition and some of your strategies for evaluating truth.
Well, I definitely don't use faith. So
don't use faith. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I think we can largely concur on all of that. And, I appreciate you trying to wrap your head around all of this and trying to share all of it with us. And I would also just maybe like to encourage you to read some better books. If you want to understand where the world came from, if you want to understand how to be a good, just, and moral person, there's some much better books worth considering.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I know about planetary disk and all of that. I know how the world got formed. I know about the gravity forces that helped bring the world together and created the world and molten rock and, all of that stuff.
That's good.
Of years. So, I mean, also the moon came from the earth too. So, and I mean, I watched also hundreds of times now. I've been watching it for over 10 years now. And I've seen people call in that say, oh, we was never on the moon. It was a hoax and yada, yada, which they don't understand. In the 1960s, we didn't even have the technology at that time to fake a moon landing. And then
I hear that.
Not radio frequencies or any of that other crap that it would have took, laser lights and everything else to distort shadows and make it all one direction, which isn't possible on the Earth. well, not the way that the moon was. So if you're familiar with the photos that Neil Armstrong took when he went on the moon, all of the shadows are one directional and diagonal, which wouldn't be possible on the moon. And the only reason that it wouldn't be possible on Earth. And the only reason it happened on the moon is because the way that the sun waves hit the Earth, hit the moon, there's no reflection, there's no refraction or anything of the light, so everything's parallel.
I think we're on board with agreeing that the moon landing did happen.
Yep.
And I'm just excited that we got to go there with you today. So, again, I don't disagree with like many of your conclusions. I'm completely on board with, even if I hear you pulling in some other things that you just don't maybe have a lot to stand on.
Yeah, it's how we get there that I think we disagree mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, but I appreciate your time and you talking to us today.
Yeah, I think the getting there is the important part, and also science is going to continue to advance. Which I don't know if you're familiar with the knowledge. I forget exactly what it was called, but eventually science is going to outpace humanity. Technology is going to be indistinguishable from magic. And actually,
I think in many ways, technology has outpaced humanity. Like we know that social media is bad for our health on a million different measures, and yet we created it and choose, I'm using that word very loosely, to use it. What a life. What a world. Benji, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good example to go to would be artificial intelligence.
Yes, it sure is.
100%.
Take good care, Benji. You have a nice day.
He's not wrong. I was about to bring up the whole AI girlfriends thing going on.
Honestly, that's why I wanted to keep that conversation going as long as we did, is because we just kept bumping into things that made me go, well, yeah, I'm so glad you know that. I didn't expect you to know that. So
yeah.
Good on you. God bless.
And I gotta say, Benji has come a really long way since the first time I talked to him, maybe a year or two ago. So Benji, you're doing great.